Tired? I have to give you a minute so you can read this. This is one of these long things. But this is the guy that's, like Mike said, been to the Lifeway store and has seen 8 dozen shelves of Bibles, and finally just says, I just want a Bible. How do I do that? Well, everybody's been there. Even, I'll let you in on a secret. Preachers walk in there and look at all these shelves, and they're not sure which ones to get either. So Mike asked me to come and take a few minutes tonight, a few minutes next week, and maybe just tell you a little bit about, if you're looking for a Bible, what you might be looking for. Now, on the next slide up, here's some examples of some of the things you'll see out on the Lifeway table. There's some great things. There's all these kind of personalized Bibles. Now, these are all some of these great Holman Christian Standard Bibles from Lifeway. They got the Sailor's Bible and the Soldier's Bible, the Teacher, all these different kind of things. Well, at Preaching Magazine, my art director, Andy Skates, and I thought of perhaps some additional options of Bibles that you might want to have. For example, the Sniper's Bible. When you have to spend hours in a field or a deserted building, waiting to line up just that perfect shot. The Sniper's Bible. Or, for some of you, you may have experienced this, the Cubicle Worker's Bible, filled with all kinds of team-proven resources to improve your productivity. There's an optional stapler that goes with it. Then the Slacker's Bible. I already see a few folks that might want to really check in on this one. As I understand this particular Bible, it has stain-resistant pages that wipe off with a damp cloth. In case get Cheetos and stuff like that on there. Then there's the Stormtrooper's Bible. Or as Andy told me to share with you, this is not the Bible you want. Move along. Only the Star Wars fans got that one. And then my personal favorite, the Starving Nashville Musician's Bible. Some of you may want this one. Comes complete with valuable coupons for White Castle and a ranking of the best tipping restaurant jobs. Why are there so many different translations? Why so many different kinds of Bibles? Well, a few reasons. One is especially in recent years, there's an increased availability of early sources, of early manuscripts. Translations are done from early manuscripts, Greek, Hebrew, various kinds of translations that come from the centuries immediately following those biblical times. Some of the earliest things we have come from the 2nd century. And so little pieces of papyrus and things like that, and then manuscripts. And as archaeologists have discovered earlier and earlier manuscripts, they study these things and they are able to incorporate them into their translations. And so some of these translations have been done the last 20, 30 years, been able to take advantage of some of the most recent resources. So that's one reason why different translations. Another reason is stylistic. Modern readers like short sentences. They like less sophisticated vocabulary. They like smoother sentence construction. Completely unlike people in Bible days who wanted the most complicated, long sentences. I'll share with you a little more with you about that. And so some of the more recent translations, you'll find the word selection at about a 6th grade level. That's kind of where it is, so that just about everybody can be able to follow along on these things. And so that's part of it, is stylistic reasons, trying to simplify and to make it easier for people in a contemporary American idiom to understand. And then another reason is financial. Some translations, for example, I've got a New International Version, NIV here. The NIV is owned by the International Bible Society and Zondervan Press. So if another publisher wants to use the NIV in any of their materials or curriculum, they have to pay for the rights to be able to use that. And so if publisher A owns this translation and publisher B wants to be able to publish some of it, publisher B has to pay publisher A. So publisher B says, aha, I'll come up with my own translation. Then I don't have to pay. And so long as it's a good translation, everybody wins. Well, there are three major categories of translations. The first one is formal equivalence. That's a more literal translation. That's an effort to do a word-for-word translation. The person that's doing a formal equivalence translation or a literal translation is trying to translate each Greek or Hebrew word into a corresponding English word. If he comes across the word speak in Greek, he's looking to try to find the best English word that says the same thing, speak. So you're looking for a very literal word-for-word kind of translation. Now, until the 20th century, virtually all translations followed this model. Everybody wanted to be word for word, be very literal. And so the King James Version is a very literal translation. Some of the very early American translations, the American Standard Version, that the New American Standard is based on. Some of you probably have that one. That's a literal translation. And even some of the more recent translations, the English Standard Version, the Holman Christian Standard Version, are both literal translations. They're formal equivalent. They seek a word-for-word translation. Now, another alternative is what's called a dynamic equivalent. There, instead of trying to find a single word to correspond to each single word in the Greek or Hebrew, instead of trying to go word for word, the translator is trying to go thought for thought. He's trying to understand what would be the thought or the experience that the original reader would have understood when he heard this passage, and he tries to create English phrases that would try to correspond to the same thing, to try to pick up the same ideas, the same thoughts. Now, the idea is to help the American reader or the English reader in the 21st century understand something of what the first century reader would have understood. Now, that can be a challenge because a lot of words, a lot of concepts have changed meaning over the last 20 centuries. For example, I read one writer who pointed out that the word beauty in the Scripture that would be used to describe a woman in the modern era would mean something very different in the first century, in the Roman period. I mean, he says in the modern era, if we talk about beauty, it generally means a cute face and a slender build. Whereas in the Roman world, it would imply full-figured or even portly. You know, I always knew I was a man born out of my time. You know, I would have looked really successful in the Roman period. So now the NIV that I just mentioned is the best known example of a dynamic equivalent translation. This approach requires a little more interpretation on the part of the translator, because he's not just translating literal words, he's trying to capture thoughts and ideas. So it requires the translator to do more interpretation. That's great, so long as you trust the translator. So long as you feel like the translator is solid and has the right ideas about Scripture, then you can feel comfortable. If you have less trust, then that can be more of a concern. And what you gain in readability, you can potentially lose in accuracy or precision. Now, there's one other option, and that is what's called a paraphrase. Well, you know what a paraphrase is when you restate what somebody said in other words, trying to make it more understandable. And that's basically what a paraphrase does. They don't worry about word for word. They don't worry about thought for thought. They basically just say, okay, here's what Paul was trying to say, and I'm going to just kind of recast it as if Paul was standing in front of me today, speaking American English. The Living Bible was probably the first really well-known example of that. I don't know if Mike and I went to school at the same place, just a couple of years apart, and I don't know about when he was there, but when I was there, that Living Bible had just come out, and the professors were calling it the Green Monster. And they weren't really excited about it. But there have been some good paraphrases. One of the more recent paraphrases that is really good and I enjoy is called The Message by Eugene Peterson. And it's a paraphrase. But it's lots of interpretation. But he does try to capture those ideas in the way that we would do it today. So that's a basic idea of what the categories are, the different kinds of translations. Now I'm going to get a chance to come back next week and take just a few minutes and talk to you about just what are some of the specific translations and just compare them. Kind of look at 4 or 5 of the different popular translations and say, here's what one looks like compared to another one, and which one might you want to be able to find. So, thanks for letting me be with you.